I don't know about timber and caliber.
just Ikenna simple.
All right, so I'll be looking at African fluid spirituality and the development of transdenominationality. The idea of transdenominationality is something I'm still experimenting. I'm still trying to figure out what it is. But as a caveat, I would like to start by saying, please, I'll be using Africa in a very generic sense, please. So forgive me about that. So, in his proposal of a transdenominational ecclesiology, the Jesuit scholar Roger Haidt sought to abstract the fundamental elements of ecclesiology that cut across the different ecclesial communities in a way that transcends the diversity that one finds in Christianity today. According to him, the goal is to reach for the historical and qualitative substance that binds the churches together as church. Ideally, transdenominationality is understood as an attempt to construct an ecclesiological method that analyzes the commonality in all churches. And we can see this is attempt, in the WCC's Faith and Order. For him, the object of this ecclesiology does not exist because no one belongs to a common church, but only to particular churches. And so it is by definition a form of abstraction, although not in a pejorative sense, since it constitutes a paradox in itself. Perhaps, for Haidt, the necessity for such an ecclesiological project could only be set in place of a structure for its emergence whenever it emerges, so it's still in the abstract level. But this is only possible where there is a chance for real rather than abstract belonging, something that he does not seem to consider. And so, what if Haidt is grossly mistaken in claiming that such an ecclesiological project does not exist yet? What if his presumption is reflective of the strong ecclesial borderlines that have historically shaped Western Christianity since the Reformation? Now, these questions compel me to, look towards African Christianity. But the question is transdenominationality possible in African Christianity? If yes, then it could serve as a model for ecumenism within world Christianity. But this search presupposes the task of reimagining the ecumenical feature of African Christianity, which rests, for me, on the fluidity of African traditional religion that transcends denominational boundaries. It also requires re-narrating the story of how denominationalism happened in African Christianity. So to put it mildly, it was the story of European division that was transferred to the African mission fields. And since the missionaries represented different Christian communities in their bitterly divided states following the Reformation, it was easy for them to fester the wounds of doctrinal and political divisions and rivalries among newly recruited believers. And by the time the different missionaries settled in African communities, the cracks began to appear. Now, I'd like to hypothesize that the hypothesis of this paper is that the resource for African ecumenical future, which is recognizable in the ecclesial praxis of transdenominationality, is located precisely within the African Geist that is defined by fluidity and interrelatedness. But to do this, I would like to look at the idea of monotheism as the ground, or African monotheism as the ground of possibility for trans-denominational ecclesial relationship in African Christianity. There is a great tendency to place monotheism in competition with polytheism and to hurriedly dismiss religions that are perceived to align with the letter, are sometimes primitive and even pagan. The appeal of African spirituality to multiple divinities was interpreted as polytheism by Christian missionaries, who then dismissed it without a chance to properly investigate its core belief system. One may argue that the acknowledgement of one supreme deity above all other gods or manifestations of deity is a statement on the monotheistic nature of all religions. But the famous Egyptologist Jan Asman would argue that whereas monotheism is a regulative idea, polytheism designates a religious practice that stands opposed to this idea. There has never been a religion that declares its commitment to polytheism as a regulative idea. Polytheism is a concept suitable only for describing monotheism as a counter-religion that polemically distances itself from other religions. Now, if we go by this argument, then the line between monotheism and polytheism becomes blurred in terms of the original definition. And what will follow is an acknowledgement of different understanding of monotheism, according to which the African, with these elements of multiplicity, would differ from other forms of monotheism, say the Jewish, the Christian, or the Islam. And so we find ourselves where we pose the question of the one and the many. But I would like to quote Bolaji Idowu, who states that in this case, within African religions, we have a monotheism in which there exist other powers that derive from deity, such being an authority that they can be treated for practical purposes, almost as ends in themselves. And so, in the context of African religion, asserting that there is only one God may be quite compatible with accepting and even worshipping other gods, so long as the relationship between God and gods is understood to be one of subordination and not exclusion. Exclusion is the decisive point, not oneness. And so, instead of talking about mono or polytheisms, it would therefore be more appropriate to refer to exclusive and non-exclusive religions, or better still, theologies. Now, no matter how we construct these notions, the fact remains that these relationships shape the spirituality of believers or adherents and have implications for both intra and inter-religious encounters, this form of mindset. And for that reason, I'll try to list some, what I consider the values that one can mine from this fluid spirituality that allows for the one and the many. The first is the pluralistic nature of African spirituality. The multiple divinities in African religion define this pluralistic nature of African spiritual practice, which makes it possible to adapt to change and allow itself to absorb the wisdom and views of other religions, unlike, some religions that are resistant to such adaptation. And so for the typical practitioner, there is no conflict in his mind between his traditional African spirituality and other faiths. They are not mutually exclusive. He sees the other faith as complementing and even adding spiritual potency to his own spiritual practice. This is Anthony Chiorazi. It is this value that is reflected in African hospitality culture that creates a co-shared space for both the strange and the stranger. The second is the absence of any exclusive claim to the truth. African spirituality does not make that claim. It recognizes the vestiges of truth in many other religions. In fact, a review of African traditional religion demonstrates an understanding of the divine as a truth that is responsible for the perception of truths in multiple contexts. There is therefore no absolutization of any knowledge or experience of the divine. And this means that sometimes the line between good and evil is blurred. And in fact, the same spiritual force that can protect can also destroy. The third is the tradition of orality. This is unlike the Christianity and Islam and Judaism. But this doesn't mean an absence of materiality. You have a lot of materiality in African traditional religion, but the tradition of orality is quite deliberate. And because it highlights a fluid epistemological approach that opens the space where religious practices can easily shift, change, or be reinterpreted as long as it serves the needs of the adherents. Of course, there are some pitfalls for this, but it makes African traditional religion a lived and living religion because it keeps reinventing itself. The fourth one is the absence of evangelization and conversion. There's no preaching for conversion in African traditional religion. There's no jihad, there's no crusade. If you want to believe, you don't want, there's no advert. And this is exactly where the violence of monotheism comes from, okay? According to Regina Schwartz, this violence of monotheism is rooted in the principle of scarcity. According to her, scarcity is encoded in the Bible as the principle of oneness. One land, one people, one nation, and in the monotheistic thinking, one God or one deity. It becomes a demand of exclusive allegiance that threatens with violence of exclusion. On the contrary, Schwartz would argue that plenitude proliferates identities without violence. And when such plenitude is figured as a God, then it is a God who gives and goes on giving endlessly without being used up, and certainly without jealousy guarding his domain. Somebody was telling me the other day, our God is a very jealous God. So, okay, I don't okay. So the fifth one is the urgency of the believer in the discernment process. From an anthropological perspective, the traditional African understands the role that the human person plays in the definition of God. It is not God who defines God's self, but human persons who define God. And if you take this to the context where I come from, the context of the Igbo land, the understanding of God is placed also side by side. Well, if you talk about Chukwu, you can also talk about Chi, but this Chi is not, it doesn't refer to God as such. It refers to your own personal destiny. And so, in this, a person's life is therefore not simply predetermined by the absolute, but also, and even more, importantly, by this, his or her own Chi. So there's a popular saying, when you agree, when you accept, then your Chi will also accept. So there's a collaboration between the two, the absolute and the individual person. So the agency of the person is also highlighted here. And finally, there is this utilitization of faith within African spirituality. So it's a question of what are the tangible results. And this defines the kind of prayers that happens in the African traditional religion. The prayer is always in terms of what we want, what we desire from God, and the mood of living with one another. Okay? So, necessities of life, food, shelter, forgiveness, harmony, and the rest of them. And also, the question of moral norms. What are the norms that guide behavior in the community? Abominations and the rest of them. Now, this African spirituality also has, with the principle of multiplicity, the idea of relatedness, interrelatedness of reality. And this is characterized by warmth, solidarity, intimacy, and the rest of them. So, now, if we take all these things together, and I try to list what I would consider as the criteria for transdenominational ecclesiology, if we put all this into consideration. So I listed five of them, and I'll try to run them through immediately. So the first one is the practice of transdenominationality is dependent on the actual faith of the people rather than on dogmatic provisions. So consequently, there's no systematic articulation of the nature of such ecclesiology outside practice. And maybe that's the problem that Roger Haidt was having. And the reality is such that while denominational normativeness is never replaced, it is, however, displaced in order to activate a transdenominational ecclesial praxis. So official faith is not jettisoned, but critically questioned by faith expressions that cross boundaries in a manner that is often perceived as dissenting by authorities. So there is this displacement without replacement. Now, the mechanism of displacement and non-replacement of normative denominational ecclesiology lies in the ability of believers to a going out and a coming back without the need of a reentrance. So the move without being reintegrated in their own faith. This is the pragmatic form of being faithful to one's tradition while remaining open to receive what is good in the denominational order. The third is that transdenominational ecclesiological behavior is evident at the level of individuals and masses, but never a communal or ecclesial decision. Individuals decide to explore the good present in the faith of other denominations, and therefore find themselves welcome in that community of faith without being subjected to relinquish their original allegiance to their primary denominations. And so for these individuals, a new way of being church is to be in and to be with an existential blend of what the American scholar Robert Woodnow called habitation and negotiation. The fourth is that the disposition of a transdenominational ecclesiological praxis is a product of an existential pluralism that has historically conditioned the cultural setting and which itself is rooted in a culture of spirituality that predates Christian mission. This point was also made by Gerard Mannion. That's in the character of societies that are multiple in nature to have this kind of fluid spirituality. And the final one is that there may be two ways of arguing the phenomenon of transdenominationality. First is to claim that pragmatic efficiency is prioritized over logical consistency, in which what works, even in differentiated formats, is sought from the denominational order in order to supply for what is lacking at the subjective level. Now, the second is to insist that African spiritual values transverse the boundaries of denominationalism, thus creating a practical possibility of a transdenominational ecclesiological practice. Now, if you analyze further, you understand that this transdenominationalism, the praxis itself, has both structural and non-structural dimensions. So structural will be found in some practices that claim to be non-denominational. We have churches now who claim to be non-denominational, many places in Africa, and people visit them and do what they want to do. But the other one, the non-structural, are some kind of teachings that attract individuals. So they want to align with these individuals. There are many examples out there. But to just go to the conclusion, I would like to raise the question of whether transdenominationality will constitute the shape of Christian Catholic unity. Catholic unity is a term that was used in Lumen Gentium 8. So what exactly is this Catholic unity at the end of the day? But I have a prophecy by Stanilo. I didn't know he would be here today. But so it states that I would like to just comment that maybe in the years to come, Africa will be a model of the new Church of Christ, in which there will be no more Catholics and Anglicans, no more charismatic and non-charismatic Catholics, no more walls separating the traditional Orthodox churches from African initiatives in Christianity. It may seem like a long journey in coming, but the convergence of meaning and the greater impulse and influence of cultural grammar in the shaping of Christian consciousness in Africa will lead to the realization of the common spiritual heritage and religious values that point toward a greater discovery of common grounds among all African Christians. But the question is, maybe, subjective assent to more than one ecclesial practice will qualify as syncretism. I don't know. These are questions that we need to answer. And perhaps the search for the whole reality impels us to look beyond denominational boundaries while rooted in our traditions. I'm not sure if African Christianity provides the universal response to these ecclesiological questions, but I'm convinced that it provides a particular template for theological consideration of the nature of the church in the future and of Christianity of the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. So it is now clear to us why he rejected the notion of being a man of timber and caliber. He's a man of timber and many gods. so the job question for this man of timber and many gods.
I really enjoyed your presentation. I have some. First of all, you talked about transdenominationality. It's something some years, I think about 15 years ago, I articulated this idea that interreligious dialogue is to be studied through a sociological lens. And when you study it through a sociological lens, you see trans-religious identities manifesting themselves out. So I want to also push it further beyond that into the Christian context, where you are saying that it's not just only a trans-denominational reality. First of all, the narrative of saying that we need to write down faith statements, so once we assent to it, I say I believe in this, then therefore I'm a Catholic or whatever, it's really nonsense, because that is not how the human person appropriates meaning in his or her life. The human person appropriates meaning by relationality, the complex webs of relationships. And so, a Muslim is in the market, a Christian is there, a Jew is there, I'm always encountering them, buying food from them, I'm interacting with them, and they are shaping me, my belief systems, in ways I'm not even conscious of. So when I say I believe in God, if you probe deeper, you discover that none of us here is really a Nicene Christian. We have become something else. And then, so who is now the Orthodox Christian and non-Orthodox Christian? That's the wrong question. We're always asking the wrong question, and when we ask the wrong question, we get the wrong answer. That said, I think what you said, and also what Stan said, the prophecy, it's not just a prophecy, it's the reality we have become. The only thing prophetic about it is that we now claim it. We are afraid to claim it yet. We are no longer Catholics. These labels no longer work. Because what is Catholic, Trinitarian, God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, probe deeper and you just be shocked about your understanding of Father is completely different from what I understand. But we all worship together and say this creed that we don't buy into the meaning. Yeah. So, no, I do think that. And I wanted to say something quickly. When you're talking about scarcity, I'm surprised you didn't even bring up the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a bankrupt reality. I know, yeah, it's not. It's a bankrupt reality. It's filled with anemia of imagination.
Okay, please ask your question.
So that said, no, it's not my. That said, how can African pragmatism help to shape this discourse of scarcity, so that the church becomes a church of abundance, not imagination?
I would say that that's actually what the paper is all about. But just put it to all of us that we are, the boundaries are actually, blurred. But yes, we recognize that some people would like to have some kind of dwelling, some form of identity, but at the same time, a fluid negotiation of other identities. So it's this idea of one and the many. It tries to articulate these things. But I don't know whether it is the church's function to do that. But there are practices that can open up to that. Some of the examples that you find, for example, in a place like Nigeria, where this thing works, it's everybody knows about the experience that is hosted by the household of House on the Rock every December. Everybody, even the Catholics are always joining it. They always join it. Everybody in Nigeria knows about the Hallelujah Challenge. Everybody joins it. And what did the church do? I think the Archdiocese of Lagos responded by doing their unusual praise. And everybody jumps on it. So And it's no longer restricted to, Catholics. At least if you have to do unusual praise, you have to invite people who are not even Catholics to perform. By that, you have already compromised the boundaries, if there are boundaries like that. So that's the point. I like what you mentioned initially at the beginning of your comments. Even for interreligious dialogue, I was looking at it and I saw that in Nigeria there are practices of what you call Chrislam. It was very strange to discover this, and it was a practice of Christians and Muslims worshiping together with the Bible and the Quran, without, and this is not syncretism, without interpreting one another. So you have a pastor, you have an imam, and they worship together. I don't know how I need to attend one of those sessions to see. So things like that are already happening. You also have Muslim sects that are behaving like Pentecostals, doing deliverance sessions. A lot of crazy things are happening. So, but how do we also have this multiple belonging, this going out and coming in, and at the same time preserve our own, some kind of identity? At least we have to go back to. Okay? At least we have to go back to. So this negotiation is what this paper is all about. But my point is, whereas those who articulated this idea was thinking of it in abstract terms, I'm saying it's already a reality. And it is happening within African Christianity. Maybe we have to look at it more to articulate it better. Thank you.
Okay, last question. Anybody from last? Yes, sir.
Yeah. So my first kind of idea as you were talking about this reminds me so much of kind of what a lot of Western scholars see happening in the Hebrew Bible, where like the Jewish people believed in, like they were the original monotheists, but yet they were constantly being tempted to worship other gods. So they clearly did believe that other gods do exist, but that Yahweh is kind of the main god there. And I think if we could still kind of attribute monotheism to the ancient Jewish people there, we should absolutely be able to attribute that, like you were saying, to African spiritualities. So I guess maybe my other kind of idea was going to be about this dialogue between more exclusivist religions, like you mentioned Christianity and Islam. So I think you kind of already answered that's happening. But is there a way to kind of combine any of these insights from like either the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, into this kind of interfaith, interdenominational dialogue there?
Yeah, I think in Jan Assmann's text, I didn't go further into what he was saying, but he was already saying that monotheism was not, originally what everybody believed, but in order to have this exclusive claim, you have to create it, because it's always Yahweh against others. So it's not just Yahweh, but you have to put the against. So that's why he had a problem with that. And then he says that one thing about polytheism is that they are translatable. So he talks about translatability, not in the sense that we used yesterday, but in the sense that you can find parallels among these different ideas of polytheism. For example, if you have the god of thunder in the Hebrew pantheon or the Greek pantheon, you can find it also in the Igbo pantheon and in the Yoruba. So this translatability of functions and identities of this multiplicity, so it's there. So I think, yeah, you can actually bring that idea in the Hebrew Bible to also study the multiplicities in religious thinking and spirituality. Yes?
We only have 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Yeah.
No. What I want to ask is, in terms how far you go in terms of living a Christian tradition, there is always the underlying of the existence of other gods or name of gods. For example, in our culture in Eritrea and Ethiopia, whenever there is a rain or thunder, we have a particular name that is as if God it is the voice of God, but not the God we worship. But people are comfortable and they don't ask about it. They still see that, but we're talking about 2,000 years of Christianity, we still carry those attributions.
Exactly. So that's why I talked about this spirituality, because it has already become a style of life for some people. And just a little comment there also. This, Yanas man was actually saying, are you sure polytheism is actually a thing? Because at the end of the day, there's this idea that there's one God, and others are just deities that derive whatever power from this one God. So, yeah.
Okay, please, let's give a hand for a man of many gods. Thank you so much, that was very nice.